Pinky's cotton candy mane went straight as she looked on in confusion.
You don't recognize me, do you?
No, or any of you, Dashie continued. It hurt me in so many ways. I knew these were her friends, but so many things have happened differently that she didn't know the truth fully. Neither did they, so I had to explain to them. I started. Dashie, take a seat, please, so I can talk to them. She did just that, in her recliner. The entire time she looked at all the ponies who occupied the couches and center rug in front of the fireplace. It was time, but first I had to start with a question. How long ago was she sent over here? The question caught them off guard, but Twilight cleared her throat as she spoke. About 15 days ago. Why? I was speechless. 15 days ago? Shit, she's been with me for 15 years. That means a day in their world meant a year here. Well, I continued, it's been a lot more time than that here. How long? Twilight asked. 15 years. All the ponies, besides Celestia, had their mouths agape. That don't explain why she don't know us, Applejack said. Well, that's the thing. When I found her, she was a filly. Come again? From my math, I think she was no older than 4 or 5 years old. Now Celestia looked surprised. You mean to tell us that you've been taking care of Rainbow Dash for 15 years? Since she was a small filly? She asked. I simply nodded and looked over to Dashie, who wore an expressionless look on her face. She is... I started, but I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I know it's not true. God, I wish it was, but... I understand. The dad now makes sense. Celestia cut me off, holding a stern look about her face. She was thinking, trying to piece together in her mind what had possibly happened. I chalked it up to the magic. Being unstable possibly reverted her in age. For a few moments it was quiet, besides the breathing of 7 ponies and myself. Finally, it was Dashie who broke the silence. So, what's supposed to happen now? I looked at the princess, trying to read her face. No matter how good I had gotten at reading Dashie's face, Princess Celestia had the best poker face I'd ever seen. I had no clue what she was thinking, or feeling at this moment. Well, it's quite simple. Twilight? Celestia looked at her to the pupil, who instantly perked up at hearing her name. Do you still remember that memory spell from the Discord incident? Twilight simply nodded, as she stood from the couch and hopped onto the floor. I knew what was going on, what Celestia had in mind. She wanted Twilight to either erase her memories and start from anew, or possibly hope she just simply wanted to give Dashie her memories of their friendships in time in Ponyville. I wasn't sure what to do. I felt it was right. I knew it was right, and needed to be done. I've been telling myself that for 15 years, as I waited for this moment. There was something I needed to say before it happened. These ponies were going to take my Dashie away, and I had some words to speak before that could happen. No. Wait. Please, I started. Twilight stopped and looked to the sun goddess. Just give me a moment with her, please. All I ask, since this is the last time we'll ever see each other. I'd given up holding back my tears. At this point, I was openly crying. The ponies could tell I was hurting, and Dashie didn't look to be faring too well either. So, figuring it wasn't too good to prolong the inevitable, I walked over to the chair Dashie sat in, knelt down to meet her eye level as I spoke. Dashie, my little Dashie, I love you with all my heart. You have done wonders to open me up from the man I once was. I had to pause a moment to settle down. You have brought me so much joy in my life that I can't possibly ever thank you for. At this point, Dashie too began to cry. That only made it worse for me. These 15 years we have had together, talking, playing, flying, all those have been so special to me. I just want you to know that I will forever love you. It doesn't matter if we aren't biologically related, or of different worlds. I don't care what you ever may think of me, or if you even ever remember me. But right now, you being my Dashie, I want you, I poked her on the chest, to physically show I was talking to her, to know that fact, if there is ever a problem that happens, and you need me, don't hesitate to find a way to get to me. Okay? I tried to laugh, passing the last part off as a joke. It worked, only slightly, as we both continued to cry. I could also hear some sniffling from behind me. I could only picture Pinkie Pie crying much like she had at the end of the second episode in Season 1, after Luna and Celestia had been reunited. Do I have to go, Daddy? It had been a few years since she'd actually called me Daddy. Most of the time it was simply Dad or Pops. It felt good, knowing she still cared for me enough to call me Daddy. much like the first time she had said it to me, so many years ago. I simply nodded my head as I stood up. Before I could fully grasp my balance, she jumped up onto me and hugged me tight. I could feel her tears on the back of my neck, and I returned the embrace. It's your actual home, Dashie. You don't belong here. You need to go back where you belong.
I belong here, with you.
It hurt so much to say, but I had to keep her convinced that this was the right thing to do. No, you don't. You are limited here, only able to fly around the house. You have no friends or other ponies to relate to. I was only taking care of you until this time would come. I never thought it would be this painful. We remained quiet for a few more minutes as we held each other tight. She didn't fight back or want to resist what was happening, which told me she knew as well what must be done.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you too, my little Dashie. We separated as she lowered herself to the ground. At this point all the other ponies had tears flowing, even the goddess herself. She had seemed quite smug about knowing what had happened, the time difference and such, but it was evident that the age difference was a shock. She most likely expected to find a 35-year-old Rainbow Dash, but instead found my 20-year-old Dashie. Twilight stepped closer to Rainbow Dash, sniffling once before her horn glowed. I knew it was coming. It hurt so much, but I knew it was right. It was what had to happen, for her friends, and in a twisted way, for me. Now I could know that she was actually going home. I wanted to be around her friends and could fly wherever and whenever she wanted to, without any limitations. She could enjoy friends' company once more.
Wait!
I looked from the floor to Dashie, as she backed away from Twilight.
Before I go, I want to get something.
Before any pony or myself could protest, she flew up to her room. She was quick and returned with a shoebox in her front hooves. I wasn't sure if she would be allowed to take anything back with her, and half expected the princess to protest, but she remained quiet, allowing Dashie to quickly write down something on a piece of paper and set it on the coffee table. She looked back to me, still crying, but with a smile on her face. I knew she had realized this was how it must end, and I knew that as well. The box, from my guessing, was probably her most cherished items that she kept for her if she had to leave, though it hurt me thinking about it. I hoped she had a picture of us. Then again, I also hoped not, for she would be forced to remember me, a world away, and that hurt just as much as anything else.
I'm so sorry, Rainbow Dash, Twilight started. I honestly wish there was another way to do this. I wish I didn't have to do this. But can't
Dashie started.
Can't he come with me?
The shuddering in her voice told me she was simply speaking her mind, not actually asking the question. Twilight shook her head, unable to keep eye contact with her friend as she cried before her. Rainbow Dash, Princess Celestia started. He could not join you in our world, much like you cannot stay in his. This was all never meant to be, and the world around us was not made to house you. And yet, Celestia looked to me, smiling, to begin to look around our living room, all the photos of us together, all her knickknacks and belongings strewn around the room. And yet, something beautiful happened here, something I cannot explain in full. When I realized where you ended up, I expected the worst. I figured you would be ruined, tainted, and tarnished from this world's cruelty. But now, I see that's quite the opposite. That here, this man that has raised you, shows me that you are in good hooves, or hands, as it were. Dashie sniffed once, beginning to calm down as Celestia's words sunk in. Celestia then returned to looking at me, still smiling. I cannot speak for you, but from what I see in front of me, the amount of love you both share and have shared together tells me that you raised her as if she was your own. Even with the obvious differences, you still raised her unbiased as to her species, her origins. You raised her as your daughter, which only makes this entire ordeal so much worse. I absorbed her words as well as the other ponies in the room. So I must say to you, dear sir, please do not hold my student accountable for this. It was never her, nor any pony else's intention to cause this much hurt to you either. If you must blame some pony, I would ask you to blame me. I'm the one that helped bring them here. So take Rainbow Dash back to her home, away from here. I just couldn't look at any of them. My heavy breathing breaking down with sobs. My mind was just going on her own. Thinking back at all the things Dashie and I did together, I took a deep breath as I spoke. Just how could I blame some pony for sending Rainbow Dash here? I sniffled and I cleared my throat as I continued. I nearly choked up as I searched for the words to express myself. These have been the best 15 years of my life, so if anything, I feel quite the opposite. I wish to thank you, Twilight, and the rest of you. Thank you for what you did, though not intentional. Thank you for all that came out of this. And finally, thank you for all my years, my life, and my love. With Dashie. I tried to smile at Twilight between sobs, but she looked on the edge of tears herself, and could only look away before she cried herself. Celestia then stood from the rug she laid on, and walked over to me as I stood. No need for thanks, good sir. Instead, I wish to thank you for taking care of one of my little ponies. She would have never made it without someone much like yourself. Celestia closed her eyes, and then leaned her horn towards me. I didn't move. I wasn't sure what was going on as she touched her horn to my head. I felt a sudden warmth rushing through my body. She drew her horn away, still smiling as she stepped back. Thank you. Then another pony spoke up. Thank you, sir, Twilight added, finally able to speak through her tears. Thank you, Applejack said. Thank you, darling, for caring for our Rainbow Dash, Rarity spoke.
Thank you,
Fluttershy quietly said. Thanks! Pinkie shouted as she sprung up to me and hugged me. I couldn't help but laugh a little from her extrinsic attitude. Better yet, the rumors on the internet were true. Her mane did smell like cotton candy. I remained silent as I nodded, then looked back to Dashie, who also wore a smile on her face. The ponies all returned to Dashie as Twilight's horn began to glow once more. Are you ready now, Rainbow? Twilight asked again, returning to Dashie and starting her magic. She simply nodded as she closed her eyes and waited the inevitable. It seemed time slowed down as Twilight's horn approached Dashie's forehead. My mind began forcing random memories of us together. I can vividly remember the splashing of the bathtub from her bath times before she showered herself. I can still taste her many failed attempts at baking and cooking in general. I still smell the outdoors from her times at the park, where she was able to spread her wings. There were so many memories. I simply had to shut off from my brain so that I could keep myself focused on Dashie. A single tear ran down her left cheek as I could see her eyes moving under her lids. Her mind was doing the same thing mine was, forcing our fondest memories all at once, for this would be the last time we ever saw one another. Finally, Twilight's horn touched Dashie's forehead. There was a bright light, and when I could see again, they were all gone. All the ponies had disappeared. Through my tears, I sighed in relief. It felt wrong, but it also felt right. She was now the normal Rainbow Dashie that belonged in Ponyville. I stood in the living room for several more minutes, just staring blankly at the empty floor that Dashie had been standing at just moments before. Then, I looked around the room and took notice of my surroundings. I noticed things were different. Pictures that once held images of me and Dashie no longer hung from the walls. Many of the random personal items of hers were scattered around the living room were gone as well. I was confused, so I ran up to her bedroom to look. When I opened the door, what I saw instead of her NASCAR and air show posters mixed with her bed and other furnishings was a simple office, a cheap desk with a computer on it and an ugly-looking potted plant. It took me some time to digest what I was experiencing before I realized what must have happened. It made sense, but it still stung me in the chest. To make sure nothing happened between worlds, Celestia must have removed any existence of Dashie ever being here. Being with me. 15 years, all down the drain as her existence was wiped from the planet. I felt as though all those years were for naught, wasted as I wouldn't be able to remember her. And yet, my memories still lingered of her. I could remember everything as if it was still vivid as when they happened. Then the thought clicked. She did something with her magic when she touched me with her horn. Did she protect my memories so that I would remember her? Had she done the same for Dashie? I walked back downstairs, into the living room, while I thought. On the coffee table sat a book. I recognized it. It was my photo album. I sat down on my couch and opened it up to the first page. There was my mother and father with me shortly after I was born. I continued to flip through them, looking at my own past. There was a gap after my parents died, but to keep my mother's dream going, I picked it back up, making false pictures of happy times enjoying my life to stick into her book of memories. Then I opened up to a piece of paper. I picked it up and immediately recognized the handwriting, or more correct, mouth writing. I speculated this was what she had written down before she left. Oh, I'm so close to crying right now.